Hello everybody, and you join me sat on a bench next to a bus stop looking out. Well, so behind me there's actually quite a long road. I've come here today, and I'll explain where this is in just a minute. I came here today because I was told it was a quiet little Cotswold village, and basically it is, but what they didn't tell me was that there's a very busy road running all the way through it. But what I'm actually here today to do is to talk about this lens that I've got on this camera today. Hello there. My camera seems to be covered in sand again. Now, I haven't been to the beach for over a year, not to get sand in the camera. And so it shows you how long sand can kind of stick around in a system and actually cause problems for you. I am here in Willersey, keep forgetting what the name's called, which is a quiet Cotswold village with the main road running through it, which makes it not very quiet. But they have something in here that is the main reason for me coming today, and that is a duck pond. And I'm sat probably a couple of 100 yards away from some ducks, and that's why I wanted to come here today, because what I'm going to be talking about is this, the XC 50-230 lens, and whether or not it's any good for wildlife photography. Now, in the last video, of course, I was out with a proper wildlife lens, the 100-400. I absolutely loved that, and I wouldn't suggest, if you've got that lens, I wouldn't suggest you actually go out of your way to use the 230 instead, because there are so many benefits of having the 100-400. You know, it's faster, the image quality is better. However, that doesn't mean that if you're stuck with a lens like this, or you know, if you're just starting out and this is the sort of the first lens that you're going to pick up just to see how you get on with it, you can't actually get some good results. Now, like I said, I'm sat not too far away with some ducks, and the all-important thing to remember here are the settings on the back of the camera. Now, the other thing to remember is that my battery's running out. I say this because I've had some problems with my battery and the camera at the moment. And it's not that the camera's bad, and it's not that the battery is bad. It's that in my camera bag, my camera has a tendency to turn itself on, or for something to hit it and then it get turned on because of that. And that's a real problem. Now, I'm just looking at a duck at the moment. He seems to be doing some movement, and I'm wondering whether he might fly away. There was a duck earlier that flew away. So I'm going to put this on the sort of settings that I would use anyway. We're on an ISO of 800 because it's not a good day today. I've got a shutter speed of 1000, and we're on an f number of 6.4, which is, if I'm out at 230, 6.7 is the limit of the lens, so 6.4 at 135. I'd be better using my other lens, using my 135 lens. But this is what we've got. This is what we're going to be using. I'm going to focus on the duck. Let's see if we can get any usable images from it. Now, right now, I should say, I'm using wide tracking at the moment, and I've got it on, I was on single, I put it on continuous high, just in case the animal actually decides to sort of move away. It is thinking about it, I think. It's quacking a bit. And I can hold this on wide tracking, and let the duck do its thing. And it does mean, of course, because I've got that tracking on, that I can zoom out and zoom in, and the tracking kind of keeps track of what it's meant to be focused on in the first place, which is actually really good. So I totally missed that shot, but crucially in this instance, that wasn't because of the lens, although there has to be sort of a caveat with this. If you're going to use a slower lens, and when I say slower, I mean really slower to focus lens, which this particular lens is, you're going to have to deal with the fact that you might not get as many shots as you would if you were using the XF lens. In particular, the 100-400 focuses very quickly, maybe not as quickly as some of the other lenses actually that Fuji produce, but quick enough so that if you're doing a bird in flight, actually you can get some pretty good results. I would estimate, and I don't know that this is wholly true, that you would probably get a third fewer pictures from using a lens like this, just because of the speed that the lens is focusing at, than you would get if you were using a better lens. That doesn't mean that this lens isn't a good idea. And one of the reasons that I wanted to make this video is because I've had a lot of people in, not just in comments, but actually I've had some emails through, I've had some people talking on a couple of social media platforms that were asking, would a lens like this, because it's a cheap lens, in terms of what Fuji produce, it's a really cheap lens. Could a lens like that be good enough to take photos of wildlife? And to be honest, with the settings that I've got today, if those photos come out all right, I've got to say the quick answer, of course, is going to be yes, of course they will. In a few seconds, what I'm going to do, there's some birds on the other bank, and then we're going to be talking about actually one of the few problems that we have with using a lens like this, and maybe how we can overcome it. Again, this is some of this is supposition, but I have done some of this inside Photoshop and in Lightroom and things like that. So it's all coming from things that have been tested. Anyway, in a few seconds, I want to be talking about that, and I'm going to be having a look at the ducks over there. But before I move on, I actually did want to mention something that happened this week, and something that was actually a bit of a milestone for me in photography, because this week we had I think it was the floral moon, the something moon. We had a big supermoon, a full moon. And for the very first time, I took a picture of it. And before we go on, I just wanted to show you, this is my picture that I took this week of the moon, very first time I've done it, with the 100-400 lens and the 1.4 teleconverter. And you know what? I'm pretty pleased with it. Here is the wonderful picture of the moon. Well, I think it's wonderful anyway. A first attempt, but I was actually very pleased with how it came out. I should say that I used the 100-400mm lens with the teleconverter for this, which gave me an effective focal length of 560mm. On a full-frame camera, that would be nearly 900mm. And one of the things that I'd forgotten in my haste to take this moon is that I really should have upped the shutter speed in order to compensate. In fact, I'm wondering if that's why I've had a few problems with this combination being a little soft. I did have somebody comment on one of the videos saying that they had nothing but a pin sharp images out of the 100-400 with the teleconverter on. And what I really should be doing then is to compensate for the extra reach with higher shutter speeds and not worry so much about the ISO and trying to keep that low. Honestly, setting everything manually isn't a particularly difficult jump to make in your photography. For me, the biggest problem is forgetfulness. Anyway, here are the first duck images that I have with the 50-230mm, which is what you're here to see, right? Now, I haven't spent long editing these images. There's a little edit done on them because it's not really a fair review if you just see a raw image, but I've applied pretty much the same look across the board on all of the videos, on all the photos you're going to see in this video. And this wasn't really about getting the most amazing photo of a duck that you can get, but it's really about testing the lens. And I think it's performed very well in this instance. To give you an idea, I was probably around 12 foot away from this particular duck. And I did stay a little distance from them because you don't want to worry wildlife when you're around them. You want to let them live their lives. And I'm pretty happy with the rendering of the feathers in this image. It seems sharp throughout the frame, although you can't really see that properly in a video. All in all, though, the quality of the shots is something that I was really pleased with. And sure, there are benefits to having an XF lens. A lens that's faster, a lens that's closer, but you're not going to see a significant increase in image quality between this lens and, say, the 55-200 unless you're really pixel peeping. I would say, though, this really is a starter lens, and
At some point you are going to want to upgrade. The only reason that I haven't already is because I have access to the 55-200. My mum has that lens, I can borrow it when I want. And I also have my own 100-400mm. So really, for me, this lens is an extra nice to have, little bit of extra reach when I'm out and about, rather than something that I absolutely rely on if I need that focal range.
So I've taken a couple more shots. I had been focusing on the ducks over on the far bank, and that means that I did get a couple of ducks falling into the water. You can't really say that they launched themselves into the water because they do kind of just sort of plop in. And this really, it kind of highlights the one problem that you've got with a lens like the 230, in that it's not good if you need that reach, if you need a little bit of extra reach. If I'd taken this, for example, to Slimbridge the other week, there are shots that I wouldn't have been able to get, just purely because the 400mm lens could just go in that little bit extra. Having said that, Mum took her 200mm lens and got some great shots. It's not that you can't take shots with that. It's not that you can't use this for wildlife. It's that if you've got a dedicated lens for wildlife, you're going to get better results in the long run. Maybe not when you first start, because that's obviously something that practice makes perfect. But definitely in the long run, having the right tools for the job is going to help. Now, another word about this, because of the way that I've had to have the camera settings on this, I did miss a shot, and I'll show you that in a second, where a duck had sort of taken off from where it was sat. And I've got the shot. I mean, I took the actual image, but because I had to have a lower shutter speed, with all that movement, it ended up being slightly blurred. It's not too bad a shot. Like I said, you'll see that in a minute. But again, that's the other problem with using something which is a slower lens to do shots like wildlife. Now, having said that, if I was on the 400mm, I think we would max out at 5.7, so you wouldn't get a lot of extra light in there, but it might be the difference of being able to do a 500 shutter speed and a 1000 shutter speed. And you know, the best results that I've had with birds in flight, with birds with lots of movement on there, they've been towards the 1500, 2000 shutter speed, and you know, that does make a significant difference. If you can speed down the movement that much, you're going to get better shots, but sharper shots of stuff in motion. The fact that you can't do that so much with this lens, it is a problem. But again, I don't want to put people off using a lens like this if it's what you can get. If it's what you can get, and if you can't afford anything else, or even if you can't go stretch to the 70-300, which I know is not available in most places. Somebody commented on the video last week saying that they have one now, but it took them 2 whole months, and I think, and I'm sure they'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think they pre-ordered it before launch as well. So I don't know how long the actual lag time is in actually getting one of those lenses if you really need it. Having said that, I think I've got some good results overall. Here are some pictures, and you can make up your own mind.
Here is that flying duck, and as I mentioned, I should have had a higher shutter speed with this, as it would have solved the problem of the blurred image. Of course, you can always do what a professional photographer would when confronted with a mistake like this, and claim that any blurring was intentional and to convey movement, although I'm not sure that anyone actually believes them. Now, I did promise to reveal a little secret that I've been using over the past few weeks that really works with this lens, and the 55-200 in fact, if you're struggling for reach. One of the things that Fuji is really good at is rendering small elements in a picture as very sharp. You might have noticed if you've taken a picture of a bee with one of Fuji's zoom lenses, you can actually crop in quite close to the image and still have a nicely rendered picture. Well, I've done that for both of the images that you're seeing on screen in this part of the video, and I've enhanced them in Photoshop. You see, Photoshop has this new enhance feature in Camera Raw, in fact, that works like the Topaz Gigapixel program and increases the size of your images by 4. Now, this isn't a cure-all if you don't have the right lens, but it does do a very good job if you've just got something a little smaller in the frame than you would have liked. Basically what it's doing is turning a 26 megapixel image into a 104 megapixel image. Whilst the main benefit of this is so that a smaller frame camera can still produce large prints, it actually does a really good job at increasing the size of your images overall, enhancing the detail, and crucially for the Fuji cameras, getting rid of those pesky worms that you might find when you sharpen. If your only access to a zoom lens is this, or the 55-200, it's a great way to get those shots that otherwise would be just out of reach.
Since I'm sitting in a rather comfortable position in a rather nice village, I did just want to take this opportunity to talk about days like this. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's not a particularly nice day. It's a very overcast, there's lots of cloud in the sky, there's no real sun. This is coming off the back of us having a week where it was sunny nearly every single day, where the weather forecast up until last night, I think it was, said it was going to be sunny today. Of course, I planned my photography around, oh, well, I'll go out that day. I can afford to go out that day. I'm not going to be tied up in meetings or having to do other sorts of work. I'll go out that day and I'll get some great shots. And here I am not being able to get any great shots because, of course, the day isn't great. However, days like this aren't always bad for photography. If you were doing wildlife shots, actually you can get some good wildlife shots like this. You could go into a forest, you could get some great shots in the middle of the trees in weather like this, because you don't have quite such a harsh light either coming in to the trees, or if you look up and you see the sky, it's not quite so bright, it's not quite so in your face. You can, again, sometimes you need to manipulate that in sort of Photoshop and Lightroom, etc. You can get some really good shots. Days like this, for me, are great for scouting. In the Cotswolds, there's no reason why I shouldn't go out into the Cotswolds and try and get as many Cotswold shots as possible. It's not a bad thing being a Cotswold photographer. And of course, if you get shots that you like, you can either plan to go back to a location at a certain point of time when you know the weather's going to be better, when you know the sun's going to be in the right place, when you know the lighting is exactly what you want, or you can take that shot and you can manipulate it in Photoshop to get something that you like. Now, I know a lot of channels out there, a lot of photography channels will go, well, that's not proper photography, but ignore them. It is proper photography. If you get an image out of this that you absolutely love, that's proper photography. It might not win awards. I'll be totally honest with you. There are photos that I took last week at Slimbridge, which I love, but probably wouldn't win awards because I cut a bit of the bird off. But I cut a bit of the bird off to get the image that I wanted. That was important to me. However, if I put that into a competition, the judges would probably quite rightly say, well, you haven't got all of your subject in the shot. Because the truth of it is this. If you put your photo into a competition, you have to go by the rules of the competition and what the judges want in that competition. If you put your photos online for somebody to see, for somebody to say, I like or dislike that photo, or if you put them up for sale as a print or as a jigsaw or whatever other merchandise you want to create, the fact is that people will buy that if they get engaged with that photo. And if you've created a photo that people can get engaged with, which, you know, a lot of people do, it doesn't matter if it's not technically right. What matters is that it sells. The reason that you take the photo in the first place is the most important thing. And if that reason is because you like the shot, and if that reason that you've put it up online is because you're happy with what you've got, go for it. I don't want to be one of those photographers that say, no, you must do this and you must do that and you must do that. I can give you some tips about, I've missed a flying bird, there we go. I can give you some tips about how I would do things. But that's not the only way, and that's not always the best way. It's just the way that I've found that works for me. Spend some time finding ways that work for you. Honestly, it's really worth it. That's probably it for today's video. But I imagine that I've saved a photo back that you probably haven't seen yet. And so let's say goodbye to you and talk about that photo with this little voiceover montagey thing at the end. Bye everybody.
Here's my final image of the day. Like I said earlier in the video, I didn't set out here to take the best pictures, but I did get this shot and I'm really pleased with it. It's not going to win any awards, but it's the sort of shot that I like to see from time to time, and I think I got the framing right here. But my main reason for making this video was to ask if the Fuji XC 50-230mm was a good enough lens for wildlife photography. And I have to say yes. Now, you're going to make sacrifices if you want to use this for your main wildlife lens. It's not as fast as it could be. The images, although good, are better on the XF lenses. And if you have to crop in, you're going to notice that more. But bar user error, you can get birds in flight, you can take animals in trees. It was a great lens to take around the zoo for the most part because it was much more lightweight than the 100-400mm. With Photoshop being able to enlarge images like this now, the reach is less of a problem, and it does make these cheaper lenses, which are a little more accessible, an alternative that can get you started without much fuss. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I'd love to know what you think in the comments below, and of course, hit that like button as well. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the little bell icon at the end, and choose the all from the menu that appears. That way you're not going to miss out any time I post a video. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I'll see you again a little bit later in the week, but until then, goodbye, good luck, and keep taking those photos.